Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Unseen Wisdom. Today we're taking a deep dive into the recent ANC National Lekgotla. Trying to figure out, is this thing a sign of real change or just more political games?
Yeah, it's a crucial moment for sure.
The skepticism is out there, especially given President Ramaphosa's track record. So, what do you think? Will these outcomes actually lead to real change for South Africans?
Well, that's the big question, right?
It is.
I mean, the Lekgotla's resolutions, they directly affect the lives of everyday people, but will they actually see those changes?
Okay, so let's get into it. Energy security was obviously a major focus with Eskom taking center stage.
Right.
What did the Lekgotla actually say about Eskom?
Well, they're promising to speed up those renewable energy projects.
Okay.
And they know they've got to tackle that massive debt Eskom's carrying. But what's interesting is they're really emphasizing economic recovery and job creation. Like, those are the ultimate goals.
Right.
So they're acknowledging the energy crisis is a real problem. I mean, they even thanked Eskom workers.
Oh, wow.
And they highlighted periods of uninterrupted supply, trying to show some progress.
But is that enough?
Yeah, that's the question.
I mean, people are tired of promises.
Exactly.
Will they buy it this time?
It's a tough sell, for sure.
Okay, so then there's infrastructure development. That's always on the agenda.
Right, it is always there.
Always. What's different this time?
Well, they're emphasizing tackling those backlogs in water and sanitation, transportation, all that, especially in rural communities.
But are they actually going to do something about it?
Well, they're acknowledging past issues, like those water tank mafias.
Oh, right.
The illegal connections. So that's something.
I guess so.
At least they're acknowledging the complexity, right?
Okay. But let's be real. Recognition doesn't always equal action.
Yep.
So let's move on to economic transformation and unemployment. And that's probably the most important issue right now. What's the plan?
Well, they're proposing a pretty big shift. They want to consolidate all those mass employment programs into one nationwide initiative.
Oh, wow. So a single program.
Yeah, one big program. We'll have to see how that works in practice.
Yeah, sounds complicated.
Definitely. And they're laser focused on youth unemployment, of course. They're talking about skills development programs specifically designed for the digital economy.
So they're recognizing that the job market's changing.
Right, they're trying to adapt. They also highlighted support for small businesses, which is crucial.
Makes sense. Anything else on the economic front?
Yes. They brought up the Expropriation Act, to speed up land claims and redistribution.
The land issue. Always a sensitive topic.
For sure. It's potentially a big development, but also very controversial.
Definitely. And the ANC doesn't exactly have a stellar track record on land reform, do they?
No, not really. And this is where I'd say, listeners, be cautious. Look beyond the big announcements and focus on the details of how they're going to implement all this. That's what really matters.
Good point. Now, they also spent a lot of time talking about revitalizing public transport, especially the rail network. Praza was at the center of that discussion.
Yeah, and they were pretty upfront about the challenges Praza faces. Aging infrastructure, financial mismanagement, safety issues, all of that.
Right. Those issues have hit working-class South Africans the hardest. They rely on those trains.
Exactly. They have no other choice. So the ANC's strategy, they're calling it a three-pronged attack.
A three-pronged attack.
Yeah. Modernize the trains themselves, make Praza more efficient, and importantly, make it safe for everyone.
Safety is key. Did they mention specific investments or projects?
They highlighted some investments, yes, and they pointed to the reopening of certain lines, like the Central Line in Cape Town.
Okay, so some positive signs. But can they keep that momentum going and address those deeper systemic issues that Praza has been struggling with for years?
That's the million-dollar question. I mean, these problems didn't appear overnight, and they won't be solved overnight either.
Right, so let's shift gears to local government. I mean, that's where service delivery really happens, or doesn't happen, as the case may be.
Right, and when it doesn't happen, that's where the frustration builds.
Exactly. So what did the Lekgotla have to say about local government?
Well, they seem to be very aware of the problems. They talked about tackling service delivery backlogs head-on, especially in rural and underserved communities.
Okay.
They emphasized ensuring that citizens receive the basic services they deserve.
That's a pretty broad statement, though. Did they get into any specifics?
They talked about a more collaborative approach, providing support and resources to municipalities, but also holding officials accountable for failures.
So more support, but also more accountability.
Right. It's a two-pronged approach.
But haven't we heard these commitments before?
We have many times.
So what's the guarantee this time will be different?
Well, they pointed to the intervention in Nelson Mandela Bay Metro as a potential model.
Oh, right, where they brought in an experienced ANC member to stabilize the situation.
Exactly. And it did seem to have some positive effects.
But can they replicate that success across the entire country?
That remains to be seen.
Okay, so a lot of promises, a lot of plans, but a lot of skepticism too.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key takeaway for our listeners. Evaluate these claims against the ANC's track record. Look for tangible evidence on the ground. That's what will ultimately matter.
Words are cheap. Action speaks louder.
Exactly. Actions speak louder.
Okay, so we've covered energy, infrastructure, the economy, local government. That's a lot to digest already.
It is, and we're just getting started.
We still have crucial areas like education, healthcare, and R&D to unpack. These are the issues that directly impact people's lives.
Absolutely, and the ANC devoted a significant portion of the Lekgotla to those areas. Let's start with education. One positive sign was their commitment to increasing spending on research and development.
Okay, that's encouraging. They also highlighted early childhood development.
They did. They talked about it as the foundation for lifelong learning, setting kids up for success.
And that's crucial, right? Investing in early education can have such a big impact down the road.
Absolutely. It's a long-term investment that pays off in so many ways.
Did they mention anything about teacher training or resources?
Yes, they talked about improving the quality of teaching in public schools and expanding bilingual education, particularly using mother tongues.
The bilingual education part is interesting. So recognizing the importance of kids learning in their home languages.
Right, which can be really beneficial, especially in those early years.
But again, the key question is implementation.
Always.
Will they provide teachers with the training and support they need to actually deliver this type of education effectively?
And will they address the ongoing issues of under-resourced schools, especially those in rural areas?
Yeah, those are critical questions.
They did mention improving school infrastructure and creating safer learning environments, particularly in those under-resourced communities. Making sure schools are places where kids feel safe and supported.
But as we've said before, we've heard promises about infrastructure improvements before.
Many times.
And the results have been mixed, to say the least.
So again, it's a wait-and-see situation.
What about post-school education and training? Did they talk about that?
They did. They specifically highlighted opportunities through TVET institutions, those technical and vocational education and training colleges.
Right.
They're setting some pretty ambitious targets, actually, aiming to reach the National Development Plan target of 2.5 million places in TVET institutions.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is. And their focus seems to be on aligning skills development with the demands of a changing economy. So, focusing on sectors like renewable energy, agriculture, information technology, those kind of things.
So equipping young people with the skills that are actually in demand.
Exactly. But will these aspirations actually translate into programs that prepare young people for those future jobs? That's the real test.
It is. And let's not forget about the issue of graduate unemployment.
Right, a growing problem.
More and more young people are graduating only to find that there are no jobs waiting for them.
It's a tough situation. The ANC acknowledged the issue but didn't get into specifics during the Lekgotla.
So another area where we'll have to wait and see what concrete steps they take.
Exactly. It's an area that demands action, not just words.
Okay, let's talk about healthcare. What did the Lekgotla have to say about improving healthcare for all South Africans?
Well, they reaffirmed their commitment to universal access to quality healthcare.
Okay, that's good to hear. But again, it's a very broad statement.
It is.
Did they provide any specific details on how they plan to achieve this?
The healthcare system faces some really complex challenges.
They did acknowledge the alarming rise in HIV infections among young people, particularly adolescent girls.
Right, that's a major concern.
And the increase in teenage pregnancies as well. They said they'll prioritize education campaigns promoting safe sex and health literacy.
Okay, so raising awareness is a start. But what about addressing the underlying social and economic factors that contribute to these problems? That's key for sure. And what about access to sexual and reproductive health services? That's an area that's often neglected.
It is. Did they address that?
They did mention improving access to those services, making sure young people have the information and resources they need to make informed choices about their sexual and reproductive health.
That's really important. But again, we need to see concrete action, not just words. Did they discuss specific plans to improve public health infrastructure?
They did touch on upgrading and expanding healthcare facilities, especially in rural and underserved areas.
Okay.
And they talked about strengthening the healthcare workforce, addressing staff shortages, improving training, those kinds of things.
Those are all important steps, but they require a significant investment of resources and a long-term commitment. And speaking of long-standing challenges, what about the fight against crime, corruption, and gender-based violence? These issues have been plaguing South Africa for far too long.
The Lekgotla did acknowledge the challenging environment in South Africa. They talked about the threats of crime, terrorism, illegal migration, and they recognized that corruption and inefficiency within government departments and agencies are making things worse.
So they're not shying away from the problems.
Not this time.
But what's the plan? How are they going to actually address these deeply entrenched issues?
Well, they outlined a multifaceted approach, starting with reforming and modernizing the criminal justice system. Their focus is on improving the capacity of everyone involved in the criminal justice system.
That sounds like a major undertaking.
It is.
Did they elaborate on what these reforms would actually entail?
They mentioned improving human resources and integrating systems so that the different parts of the criminal justice system can work together more effectively.
Okay, that makes sense.
Anything else?
They also talked about investing in technology, especially for border management.
Okay, like what kind of technology? Things like biometric systems and electronic travel authorization, modernizing border control to try to combat transnational crime and illegal migration.
That's certainly a critical area. But what about addressing crime at the community level? That's where people are most directly affected.
They did emphasize the need to implement the integrated crime and violence prevention strategy across all communities, and they specifically highlighted the safety of women and children.
That's crucial. Gender-based violence is a national crisis, and it requires a sustained and comprehensive effort to address it. How will they ensure these strategies are actually implemented effectively at the local level?
Well, they talked about developing accountability metrics across all government clusters. So the different departments and agencies will be held responsible for actually implementing these crime prevention strategies.
Accountability has often been a sticking point in the past, so we'll have to see how this plays out in practice. Did they mention anything about tackling corruption?
They did. They specifically mention priority offenses like economic and commercial crimes, organized crime, and corruption.
Those are all areas where South Africa has faced serious challenges. What's the plan there?
They talked about synchronizing investigative and prosecutorial efforts. So basically making sure that the investigations and prosecutions are working together more smoothly to bring criminals to justice.
Okay. Anything else?
They emphasize the importance of protecting whistleblowers.
That's crucial. Protecting people who come forward to expose wrongdoing is so important for building a culture of accountability and transparency. But it's not just about having laws in place. It's about actually enforcing those laws and ensuring that whistleblowers are protected from retaliation.
Exactly. Words without action are meaningless.
All right, we've covered a lot of domestic issues. What about South Africa's role on the global stage? Did the Lekgotla address international relations and foreign policy objectives?
They did. They highlighted the ANC's commitment to utilizing South Africa's G20 presidency to advocate for the Global South.
Okay, so using that platform to promote the interests of developing nations.
Exactly. They want to champion issues like multilateralism and sustainable development.
That's an ambitious goal. Can South Africa, with all its own domestic challenges, really make a significant impact on the global stage?
It's a question a lot of people are asking. They also mentioned continued support for BRICS.
The bloc of emerging economies.
Right, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They believe BRICS provides a platform to reshape global governance and advocate for a more equitable world order.
So they're looking to strengthen ties with other emerging economies and challenge the dominance of Western powers in global institutions. It's a bold strategy.
It is, and it will be interesting to see how they navigate the complex geopolitical landscape, especially given the ongoing war in Ukraine and the tensions between the U.S. and China.
How will they balance these global aspirations with domestic priorities?
That's the key challenge. They also mentioned plans to host the Liberation Movement Summit in 2025 and commemorate the 70th anniversary of the Bandung Conference.
Events that underscore their solidarity with other nations in the Global South.
Exactly. Events that emphasize their historical ties to liberation struggles and their ongoing commitment to promoting cooperation and development in the developing world.
Okay, so the Lekgotla covered a vast array of topics, from domestic challenges to global aspirations.
They certainly tried to be comprehensive.
But the big question that hangs over all of this is, will these resolutions translate into concrete actions and tangible improvements in the lives of everyday South Africans?
That's the question.
That's what everyone wants to know.
The public will be watching closely, judging their actions, not their words.
And it's worth noting that woven throughout these pronouncements was this recurring theme of the ANC's battle of ideas.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It seems like they're acknowledging a disconnect between their vision for South Africa and how it's perceived by a lot of citizens. They talked about articulating their transformative agenda more clearly.
Right, making sure it resonates with all sectors of society.
So they're admitting their message isn't getting through.
It seems that way. And they recognize the need to engage more actively and persuasively, to win over hearts and minds, not just votes.
It's almost like they're feeling the pressure from other political parties, social movements, maybe even from within their own ranks. There's this sense of urgency.
Right, like they need to reclaim the narrative.
And convince people that they're the party of the future, not just the past.
Exactly. They're trying to position themselves as the champions of transformation, the driving force behind a more just and equitable society.
But they also seem to acknowledge that transformation is a contested concept.
It is.
One that requires ongoing dialogue and engagement with all sectors of society.
And they even talked about the media's role in shaping public perception. They emphasized the need for factual and evidence-based reporting that reflects the progress they claim to be making.
So are they just calling for more favorable coverage? Or are they genuinely committed to greater transparency and accountability?
Their actions will speak louder than their words.
It's certainly a complex situation, with no easy answers. But it's clear that the ANC is at a crossroads, facing a critical moment in its history.
And the choices they make now will have a profound impact on the future of South Africa.
Okay, let's take a step back for a moment. Why should our listeners care about the outcomes of this ANC National Lekgotla?
Because these resolutions, if they're actually implemented effectively, have the potential to impact their lives in very real ways. We're talking about the electricity they rely on, the education their children receive, the safety of their communities, the economic opportunities available to them and their families.
It's not just about politics, it's about people's lives.
Exactly. Their hopes, their dreams, their struggles.
And it's about holding those in power accountable.
Absolutely. Making sure they're delivering on their promises, creating a South Africa that lives up to its potential.
So, we've talked about the skepticism surrounding these pronouncements, given the ANC's track record. But that doesn't mean we should just dismiss them out of hand.
No, it's important to engage critically with these ideas.
To scrutinize the details, to demand transparency and accountability, and to ask ourselves, do these resolutions represent a genuine commitment to change? Or are they just another chapter in a long-running political drama?
That's the question we'll be exploring as we continue to follow these developments.
And ultimately, it's up to each individual to decide whether they believe the ANC can deliver on its promises this time around.
A decision that should be based on a careful consideration of the facts, the evidence, and the track record of those in power.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but this is just the beginning of the conversation.
The ANC has laid out its vision for the future.
But the real test will be in the implementation.
And that's where you, the listener, come in. It's your responsibility to stay informed, to engage in dialogue, to hold those in power accountable for creating a South Africa that works for all, and to contribute to the ongoing battle of ideas that will ultimately shape the destiny of this nation.
So, as you process all of this, what stands out to you as the most significant developments? What are the most pressing questions that need to be answered?
For me, it's the tension between ambition and skepticism that really defines this Lekgotla. The ANC has laid out some bold plans, addressing many of those critical issues facing South Africa. But there's a real sense of, we've heard this before.
Like a movie sequel with a promising premise, but you're hesitant to get your hopes up because the previous installments let you down.
Exactly. You're cautiously optimistic, but you need to see some real evidence that things will be different this time.
And I think that captures the mood of a lot of South Africans right now. They're yearning for change. They want a government that actually delivers on its promises. But they've been disappointed before. So their trust needs to be earned.
It does.
So the challenge for the ANC is not just to articulate a compelling vision, but to back it up with concrete action, with tangible results that people can see and feel in their everyday lives.
Absolutely. And that's where the focus needs to shift now, from pronouncements to implementation.
From talk to action.
The next few months will be crucial in determining whether this Lekgotla marks a genuine turning point or just another missed opportunity.
Well, we've certainly given you a lot to think about. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought, something to mull over as you follow these developments in the coming months.
Okay.
The ANC emphasized the importance of its battle of ideas, right? They recognize the need to engage with all sectors of society to build that shared vision for the future. But what if that battle extends beyond politics? What if it's also a battle for the soul of South Africa?
Ooh, now that's an interesting question. What do you mean by that?
I think South Africa is at a crossroads, not just politically, but socially and culturally as well.
Right.
The country is grappling with its past,
Mm-hmm.
with the legacy of apartheid, with the challenges of inequality and injustice, and it's searching for a way forward, a path towards healing, reconciliation, and shared prosperity.
So you're suggesting that the ANC's battle of ideas is just one part of a larger struggle to define what it means to be South African in this complex and rapidly changing world.
Exactly. It's a battle for hearts and minds, for a shared sense of identity, for a future that embraces the diversity and the potential of all its citizens.
That's a powerful idea, and I think it resonates with a lot of South Africans.
And it's a battle that requires everyone's participation, not just politicians, but ordinary citizens.
Right.
Artists, activists, business leaders, educators, everyone who has a stake in shaping the future of this nation. So as you go about your day, as you engage with your community, as you reflect on the challenges and opportunities facing South Africa,
Yeah.
consider this. What role will you play in this battle for the soul of the nation?
What kind of future do you want to create? For yourself,
Mhm.
for your family, for your community, for the generations to come.
Those are the questions that matter. The
Wow.
questions that will shape the path that South Africa takes in the years to come.
And as we navigate this complex, uncertain terrain, remember, we're all in this together.
We are. The future of South Africa is not predetermined.
No.
It's something we create
Mm-hmm.
collectively through our choices, our actions,
It's our commitment.
our unwavering commitment to building a nation that reflects the best of who we are and the best of what we can be.
And that's a message of hope.
It is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the ANC National Lekgotla and the battle for the soul of South Africa. Keep those questions in mind, stay engaged, and as always,
Stay curious.
until next time.
And this whole battle of ideas thing brings us back to education, right? The ANC is really emphasizing reshaping education in South Africa.
They're talking about this comprehensive approach, from early childhood all the way to tackling graduate unemployment.
Mm.
Sounds ambitious, but given the state of education in South Africa, can they actually pull it off?
Well, that's the big question. They've laid out this roadmap with increased funding for research and development, a focus on improving teaching quality, and expanding bilingual education.
Bilingual education. That's interesting. So they're recognizing how important it is for kids to learn in their mother tongue,
Right.
especially in those early years.
It seems so. But the question is, how will it actually work? Will teachers have the training and resources they need, especially in those under-resourced schools?
That's a good point.
Mm.
And then there's the elephant in the room. Right.
The inequality.
The inequality.
Yeah.
Can the ANC really bridge that gap between the well-resourced schools and those that are struggling just to get basic infrastructure and resources?
It's a challenge they've been wrestling with for years. And it's not just about buildings and facilities, right? It's about quality teaching, relevant curricula, giving all learners a real chance to succeed regardless of their background.
Okay, and speaking of opportunities, what about post-school education and training?
They talked about that too, specifically expanding access to TVET institutions, those technical and vocational colleges.
Right.
They're aiming for 2.5 million places, which is a huge expansion.
Mm-hmm.
And they're emphasizing alignment with the changing economy, focusing on sectors like renewable energy, agriculture, IT, preparing young people for the jobs of the future.
It makes sense. But will these programs actually deliver? Will they actually lead to jobs?
That's what we need to see. And then there's graduate unemployment, which is a growing problem.
It is. More and more young people are graduating with degrees but can't find jobs.
The ANC acknowledged the problem, but didn't really offer any concrete solutions.
So we'll have to wait and see what they come up with.
Exactly. They need to move beyond just acknowledging the problem and start taking real action.
All right, let's move on to healthcare. The ANC reaffirmed their commitment to universal health care, which is, a fundamental right.
It is.
But the reality is that the healthcare system in South Africa is facing a lot of challenges.
They acknowledge that, highlighting issues like inadequate infrastructure, staffing shortages, and that alarming rise in HIV infections among young people.
Right, that's a major concern.
They talked about upgrading facilities, strengthening the workforce, prioritizing education campaigns on sexual and reproductive health.
Those are all steps in the right direction, but it's going to take a lot of investment and a long-term commitment to really make a difference.
Absolutely. And it's not just about physical infrastructure and medical personnel. It's about addressing those social determinants of health, those underlying factors like poverty and inequality.
Right, it's about tackling the root causes.
Exactly. It needs to be a holistic approach.
Okay, let's shift gears to another serious issue facing South Africa. Crime, corruption, and gender-based violence.
The Lekgotla didn't shy away from these challenges. They were pretty upfront about the threats posed by crime, terrorism, illegal migration, and they acknowledged that corruption within government institutions is a huge problem.
So they're not trying to sugarcoat the situation.
No, not this time.
But what's the plan? What are they going to do about it?
Well, they outlined this multifaceted approach, starting with reforming and modernizing the criminal justice system, improving human resources, investing in technology, strengthening crime prevention strategies.
Sounds comprehensive, at least on paper.
It does, but will it actually be effective? That remains to be seen.
And corruption is such a deep-rooted problem.
It is.
The ANC did say they're committed to protecting whistleblowers.
Which is a positive step.
But it's not enough to just have laws on the books.
Right.
You have to enforce them and make sure people who come forward aren't punished for speaking out.
Exactly.
And that brings us back to that key question of implementation.
Right.
The ANC's laid out this ambitious agenda, but can they actually deliver?
The public is skeptical. They've heard these promises before. So the next few months will be crucial. We'll see if this Lekgotla is a genuine turning point or just more of the same.
It's a test for the ANC. The world is watching, and South Africans are watching even more closely.
We want to see results.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. The Lekgotla also touched on South Africa's role in the world. What were their main foreign policy objectives?
They want to leverage South Africa's G20 presidency to champion the global South.
Okay, using their platform to promote the interests of developing nations.
Exactly. They talked about promoting multilateralism and sustainable development.
Ambitious goals. Can South Africa, with all its internal challenges, really make a difference on the global stage?
That's a good question. They also reaffirmed their commitment to BRICS, that bloc of emerging economies.
Right.
And they believe BRICS offers a way to reshape global governance, advocate for a more equitable world order.
So strengthening ties with those other emerging economies, challenging the dominance of Western powers.
Exactly. And they also mentioned hosting the Liberation Movement Summit and commemorating the Bandung Conference.
Underscoring that solidarity with other nations in the global South.
Right, highlighting those historical ties to liberation struggles, that commitment to cooperation and development.
So the Lekgotla painted this picture of South Africa's future, both domestically and internationally.
It did.
But, as we've been discussing, the real test is whether those plans will be put into action.
Actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. And the public will be judging based on what they see, not what they hear.
Absolutely.
And that brings us back to the ANC's battle of ideas. This idea that they need to win over hearts and minds, not just votes.
Right. They're recognizing that they need to do a better job of communicating their vision, of connecting with people.
They're acknowledging that there are different visions for South Africa's future, and they're trying to shape that narrative.
It's not just about politics. It's about shaping the very idea of what it means to be South African in today's world.
So what does all this mean for our listeners? Why should they care about these pronouncements, these promises, these plans?
Because it all has the potential to shape their lives, the lives of their families, the future of their country. This isn't just about abstract political debates. This is about the concrete realities of people's lives.
It's about having access to electricity, quality education, safe communities, economic opportunities.
And it's about holding those in power accountable.
Making sure they deliver on their promises.
Creating a South Africa that lives up to its potential.
The ANC's laid out their vision. Now it's time for them to show us what they can do.
It's time for action.
All right, so as we wrap up our deep dive into this ANC National Lekgotla, what are your main takeaways? What really struck you?
Well, for me, it's that tension, between the big ambitions and the skepticism. The ANC's laying out these bold plans, tackling these big issues head on, but, there's this feeling of we've heard it all before.
It's like, I don't know, watching a trailer for a movie sequel.
Yeah.
It looks great, but the last few films were kind of a letdown. You're cautiously optimistic, but
Exactly. You need convincing.
you need to see some real change this time around.
And I think that captures the mood in South Africa right now. People want change. They want a government that delivers, but they've been let down before.
Some trust needs to be earned.
Absolutely. It's not just about words anymore.
Action, not just words.
Right. So the challenge for the ANC, it's not just about vision. It's about backing it up with concrete action.
Results that people can actually see and feel in their lives.
And that's where the focus needs to shift now. From pronouncements to implementation.
From talk to action.
The next few months will be crucial. Will they deliver, or will this just be another missed opportunity?
And ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide if we believe them this time around.
To look at the facts, the evidence, their track record.
And to hold them accountable.
Absolutely.
Well, we've certainly covered a lot in this deep dive, but remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation.
And it is.
This Lekgotla is just the starting point. What happens next is what really matters.
And that's where you, the listener, come in, stay informed, stay engaged, keep asking those tough questions.
Make your voice heard. The future of South Africa depends on it. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time.